All right, so let's talk interviews. This is a really, really important topic that I don't think that we necessarily pay much attention to. But interviews are one of they're one of the biggest things within journalism. They're the way that we actually get our information. And so I really want to go over this because you are going to be having to conduct an interview, and I want you to know how to do it. First thing to know is this. When we have interviews for a story, you need to have at least two. Plan for four, get three. So here's what I mean. When you come up with your interviews, you need at least two. I will be sad if you only have two, but at least two interviews for your story. Typically, you want to have three for your story. Plan to get four because usually one isn't going to work out. Even if you plan for five, then you have backup options. And that's really, really helpful because sometimes you'll interview somebody and they won't give you near the quotes that you want them to give you. So they'll give you some really kind of rough information and it's not as great of an interview as you had planned. And so if you have a backup interview, if you have somebody else you can interview, that's really, really useful for you. All right. So interview how-tos, I have broken them into 10 basic things. Number one, okay, this is so important. I want you, first thing, you are going to hit record. We're going to talk about recording in a minute. I should have put that first. You're going to ask them if you can record. You're going to hit record. Then you're going to take your pencil and your paper because you're going to have paper. We'll go over that in a minute too. And you are going to say, will you state your name and how to spell it, please? Okay, and that sounds silly. I know it does. But even if the name is Anne, do they spell it with an E? Do they not? We're not going to make the assumption, and we do not misspell a name in a story. That should be a number one most important question that we ask is how somebody spells their name. I don't care if it's somebody you know really well. I don't care if it's Mr. Jackson or Miss Stoltenberg or your best friend. You're going to ask them how to spell their name first and last. All right, we're going to opt for a face-to-face interview whenever it is possible. And there's a few reasons for this. Number one, as a journalist, you get a lot of information based on body language. And so whenever you are talking and you see somebody kind of clam up or they get nervous or they get stressed out when you ask a question, that maybe changes the way that you want to frame your next question. Or maybe it is something that you want to take note of and know that that made them uncomfortable. Or if they light up and they get excited to answer a question, that's something else that's important. Maybe you want to build on that because you're getting some good answers. Those may be your better questions. You can always ask follow-up questions if you realize that if you realize they're comfortable or that they're uncomfortable. You can change questions you had planned. We also typically reveal more when we're face-to-face in terms of I'm more willing to explain what I mean because we can see a look of confusion. So if you're sitting there and you look confused, your interviewee will actually typically go through and kind of change what they're saying a little bit and explain to you, which can get us better quotes. So face-to-face is really, really, really important. And I know that we have anxiety and I know that it's awkward and I know that it gets really stressful, but this is one of those really important parts to kind of break down and get used to doing. I can't stress that enough. So I would say face-to-face in person is our number one thing that we want to do. Then video conferencing if we need to. So this can be Google Meet, this can be Zoom, this can be Skype, this can be FaceTime. And after that, a phone interview where we can at least hear their voice and hear inflections and ask questions and that kind of thing. And then we're going to go to email. So emails really kind of are, if we can't get them any other way, but we really need this interview, that's what we're going to do. And our very last one, which you're never going to do, is going to be a text message because we're never going to do text message interviews. That is not an answer. So that's a no. All right. So you're going to opt for a face-to-face interview because it makes a difference and you're professionals. Number three, you are going to be prepared. Be prepared, be prepared like the Lion King, be prepared. Okay, so you're going to have your questions, you're going to have backup questions, and you're going to be able to kind of change your questions on the spot so that you can get a good quote that says something. We like quotes that say something. And I know that that's a really, really, really kind of thing to say. And I know it sounds silly. But the thing is I can express to you how many times when you're going to go into an interview and you're going to say, how was Friday night? And they're going to say, fun. And you're going to say, okay, what was fun about it? What was the best part? What was the worst part? So you're going to be ready to kind of change your questions based on that. So be prepared and have backup questions ready. Number 4. Okay, I talked about this when we talked about number 1. The first thing that you're going to ask, yes, you need to ask, is you're going to say, may I record this interview? Then you're going to take your phone and you're going to hit record, and it's going to be brilliant. Then, and I mean then, you're going to do both. You're going to start taking notes, right? So you're going to say, all right, will you state your first and last name and then spell them for me? And then you are going to write that down. We take notes too for a couple of reasons. Number 1, it keeps us engaged in our interview and make sure that we're listening, we're paying attention. It gives us something to do with our hands if we're nervous, but it keeps us engaged. The second thing that it does is that whenever you're going back later to write your story from your recording, you may have things in your notes like what somebody looked like that day, or the questions that stressed them out, or those little subtleties that you forget. So your notes, I don't need you to quickly write down exactly what was said, but when something stands out to you, star and say, stood out the way they explained prom. So that way when you're going back later, you can go to that part of your interview that you recorded on your phone and you can re-listen, and it'll jog your memory about what was important. So come up with your own kind of coding system about things that matter whenever you do your interview, because that makes a really big difference. So you are going to make sure that you record and you take notes. We're going to do both. And our first question is going to say, may I record you? Because we never want to misquote. We never want to misquote, ever, ever, ever. All right, number 5, we're never going to make assumptions. We're never going to assume what somebody's going to say. So even if it's a dumb question, we're going to ask anyway, because sometimes you'll be surprised as to the way somebody interpreted something or what they felt in that moment. So you're never going to assume what they're going to say. You're going to ask all questions because you're interviewing them. You're not writing their own story. They're telling you their story and then you're writing it down. But it's important that they're telling you. You are not basing this off of what's in your brain or what you've already assumed. Number 6, no one-word questions unless you have a follow-up question. So let me tell you what's really horrible is when you go and there is a big game, High North on Friday night, and you say, did you have fun at High North? And they say, yep. And then you're dead in the water because you can't have a quote that says, yep. So what you are going to do is you're going to ask follow-up questions based on that. So you're going to say, did you have fun? High Fun North? Yep. Then you're going to say, excellent. What was the best part? What was the highlight of the experience? What do you think? What was the part that was most fun for you? You're going to have that follow-up question ready if you ask a one-word question. Number 7, you're going to dress to impress. And I know this feels silly, but there's a couple of things here. Number 1, whenever you feel like you look impressive or you look nice, then you conduct your interview more professionally, and you're a professional. So we're going to dress for the audience that we want to impress. If it's a peer, okay, that's fine if you're in jeans and a t-shirt and you look the same. But if you're going to interview Dr. Scott Beck, I want you to look impressive. I want you to be more formal because it makes them take it seriously as well. Now then, I don't expect you to walk in a prom dress, nor do I expect you to wear a suit or a dress of any sort, but just don't wear your pajama pants that day. Look nicer, because it matters the way that they take it. So if you're being serious, they're going to be more serious and you get better quotes. Number 8, okay, we are going to be persistent. We are not going to be interrogative. There's a very big difference. So make sure that the person you're interviewing feels comfortable when you talk to them. Make sure that you're having a conversation. There's flow. Their guards are down. And when there's a question you really want, if they avoid it, we're going to be persistent. So we're going to ask the question differently, but we're not going to interrogate them. You are not interrogating them. That means that you are question, or why aren't you answering this or anything like that, because that's going to put somebody on the defensive. And if they feel defensive, if they feel like they're defending themselves, then you're not going to get good quotes and they're not going to enjoy their experience and they're not going to want to be interviewed again. And that's really sad. So kindness goes a really long way, and we're going to be persistent. We are not going to interrogate people. All right. Number 9, you are going to be timely. You are going to show up on time. You're not going to waste somebody's time. I actually would love for you to be early, but be timely, be on time, and you're not going to waste their time. So you're going to get down and you're going to get started and you're going to get to business. You're going to say, okay, here we go. Because the more that we kind of waste time and dawdle, the more that we're wasting their time, and they don't want to, they kind of try to hurry and make the interview go quickly, and then that's really sad for us. So the next piece is this. You're going to conduct your interview as closely to the event as possible. So if you're covering a High North game, you're going to get your interviews that night. Because the problem is that when you ask 3 days later or 4 days later or 5 days later, their answers are going to be a little bit different because they've slept since then and the excitement's worn off, and you're going to get a different experience. But if you can ask somebody in the moment what has happened or closely following the event, then you're going to get a more raw, natural understanding of what happened. All right, number 10, you are going to think on your feet. You're going to be ready to ask questions that you didn't previously prepare, and you're going to pay attention to what they're saying. So that's why I said, have that notepad, keep yourself engaged, take notes, listen, be an active listener. Okay, I know, turn on your listening ears. That's what I used to tell when I taught little kids. You're going to turn on your listening ears and you're going to listen to what they're saying, because what they're saying matters. Your story depends on it, and you never know what you might uncover. So it might be that you ask a question and then your story takes a direction that you didn't anticipate, and it's a better story, or it's a better angle, it's a better idea, and you need to be ready to change those questions. And so your interview should not only be the questions you asked, but ones that end up popping up as you go. All right, news story versus interview questions. They're different. So your news story questions are going to focus on the facts and details, dates, names, locations, costs, happenings, who, what, when, where, why. You are going to explain relationships between people and their interests. So when I'm covering something about the Republican National Convention, I'm going to mention when it is Donald Trump's son talking, and I'm going to say that it's his son because that might give me a little bit of context as to why he's saying what he's saying. It gives me some perspective. We are going to show sequences of events, right? The who, what, when, where, why, our basic facts. Our feature story questions are still going to have the who, what, when, where, why. We're still going to need those basic facts. We're still going to understand that. But we are going to focus on descriptions of the event. So setting, paint the picture, right? We're going to focus on feelings. So we're going to ask people how they felt or what they interpreted. We're going to listen to their stories and their anecdotes that they tell, and we're going to humanize that story. So when we can humanize it, when we can draw the impact for people that were there, it makes a really big difference. All right, types of interview questions. You have the who, what, when, where, why, how often, how many, right? So those are really basic questions. Those are memory questions. Those are going to be our really most important ones. You're going to ask those first because you're going to ask your most important questions first. Your most important questions first. Then I want you to focus on evaluative questions. What do you think? What did you experience? What did you feel? Those are evaluative questions. We're evaluating their feelings. We're evaluating their thought process. We're evaluating what happened, right? And then divergence. And I know I listed that second. I want you to think of that as third. Those are our what if questions. I'm not too focused on those. Rarely are those going to apply in the types of stories you're writing, but it's important to know that they're a part of journalism. You're going to make sure questions flow. So we're going to go from those important who, what, when, where, why questions down to the deeper, more important questions. I mean, not important questions, down to the deeper, more kind of nitty gritty questions. But our most important things are going to be at the front, because if somebody says, "Oh, look at the time, I got to go," we got our most important things out of the way. Or if they get uncomfortable later on and they don't want to talk, then you still have a bit of an interview you might be able to kind of salvage. And then our difficult and embarrassing questions go last. That way we don't turn them off before we need to ask more questions. And that way we don't make them feel uncomfortable when and leave that as kind of the first thing, because that can kind of mess up our entire interview. All right, by too long, don't read. Feature stories and news stories are different. I was going to put these in one thing. I decided to break them into two to make it easier on you, but that's okay. So you're going to know what type of story you're writing. Is it a feature? Is it a news? You're going to know why you are writing it. Why are you covering your story? Why? Then you're going to conduct your interview accordingly, following the 10 tips that I listed. If you have questions, let me know. Be wise, be kind, be smart, go into the world. You're brilliant. And ask questions because they make a difference. And we're curious, and you're a journalist. So get ready to interview, get ready to work on your first story. Have fun.